Gary's dropship didn't land on Narth. It broke against the planet like a crushed insect. The first impact sheared off the starboard stabilizer, the second ripped the aft plating. By the third, the hull was shrieking like metal dragged across bone. When it finally stopped, the nose was buried in fractured ice, emergency lights dead, and Gary's visor display blinking static. Oxygen low. Suit integrity compromised. No signal. He staggered into the cold, boots sinking into snow that squealed. Beneath the weight of ruined gravity plating still humming in the wreck behind him, wind howled down the basalt ridge, sharp and cruel, dragging sheets of crystal dust into his face. Each breath sliced his lungs with cold that felt chemically. Wrong anti-hydrogen particles like needles in his throat. His thermal cloak flapped uselessly around him, already wet with melted frost that froze again before dripping. He counted steps, 10 at a time. His legs moved without feeling. Each joint locked and screamed, but he made them bend. If he stopped, he'd die here, just another statue frozen mid-crawl on a world that didn't care about survivors. His emergency beacon pulsed red once, then darkness. The last whisper of hope bled out into the snow. The ridge ahead was a mess of black basalt columns and jagged ice teeth. He moved between them like a ghost, breath ragged, face burned raw by wind. Sensors on his sleeve flickered and died. The storm was worsening. No way to tell which direction led to safety. No up, no down. Just ice and wind and death in every direction. Then something flickered, a glow. Not from failing electronics, not from plasma leaks. It was too steady, too warm. Violet, faint but real just ahead, pulsing through the blizzard like a heartbeat. He didn't question it. Instinct moved his feet. Sailors chase lighthouses. Pilots chase anything that glows. He stumbled, fell, rose again. The glow grew stronger with every broken stride. Not a reactor core, not a beacon, a cave. Low and wide. Mouth outlined in pulsing violet light and a breath of heat that hit his frozen face like salvation. He ducked inside, shoulder scraping the edges of glimmering mineral walls that sparked like distant stars. The wind dropped instantly, replaced by silence and warmth. The fire at the center of the chamber wasn't normal. It didn't burn with red or orange but bloomed in layers of violet and blue like flower petals unfolding in reverse. It hissed quietly, rising from a ring of crystals arranged in perfect symmetry. The heat rolled outward in gentle waves. Beside it stood a figure tall, still, her skin a deep shade of lavender, like dust condensed into flesh. Long blonde hair fell in soft ripples past her shoulders, and in her hands she held a spear of carved mineral and alloy. Her eyes glowed gold, catching every flicker of firelight. Not afraid, not angry. Just watching. Gary fell to one knee, vision blurring. She stepped forward, measured, deliberate, and spoke. Her voice was low, smooth, and calm. Each word clear, her tone layered in something ancient and precise. She said he had two choices: return to the storm and become part of the ice, or stay and earn the fire with honest intention. He tried to stand but stumbled again. He unhooked his cloak, held his empty hands up, no weapons, no threat. Just a man clinging to the last thread of warmth left in the universe. She nodded once, slowly, and stepped aside. Gary crawled to the fire, collapsed beside it, and for the first time since crashing, he felt warmth touch his bones. He didn't know who she was, didn't know what laws she followed or what exile meant here. But in that moment, none of it mattered. He was alive, and she was the reason. The fire cracked softly, casting shifting violet halos along the crystalline walls of the cave. Gary sat hunched near its edge, his gloved hands spread to absorb every drop of warmth. The pain was returning now, dull aches turning into sharp. stabs as numbness thawed from his joints. He gritted his teeth against it. Better pain than nothing. Beside him, the woman, this stranger with twilight skin and golden eyes, remained silent. She hadn't moved much since letting him enter. Her spear still rested in reach, angled slightly toward him. A quiet reminder. Gary's eyes wandered to the flames. They weren't natural. They didn't flicker or gutter like open fire should. Instead, the violet petals curled and bloomed in measured pulses, fed not by wood or fuel, but by ringed clusters of pale crystal arranged around a shallow pit. Occasionally, sparks would drift upward, spiraling in fractal arcs toward the vaulted ceiling. It was beautiful, yes, but controlled. Engineered. Intentional. She finally moved. Just one step, boots whispering against mineral tile as she crouched beside a small bowl nestled near the fire. Steam coiled up from it. Without a word, she held it out. Gary reached slowly, cautious not to make sudden movements. The water inside was warm, almost unnaturally so. He drank, each swallow dragging heat down into his chest like a miracle. When he looked back up, she was watching him again, studying him. She spoke then, her voice smooth, but weighted. Her words came slower this time, as if translating on the fly. She called herself Lily. It wasn't her true name, she clarified, but the closest approximation his ears could manage. She told him he was trespassing on Carolyn territory and that the guild enforced exile laws with brutal precision. Aid to outsiders was forbidden. A single act of mercy, if discovered, could erase her name from every record. Her family would not speak of her. Her people would not shelter her. She would be less than an exile. She would be erased. Gary's throat tightened. He whispered that he hadn't meant to land here, that the crash was an accident. She believed him, but belief wasn't the same as safety. Then she said something that made his heart still. You have fire in you, but no rhythm. You fight to live, but you don't know why yet. He blinked, unsure if it was metaphor or prophecy. She walked to the back wall of the chamber and placed her hand on a panel set into the crystal. At her touch, glyphs lit up soft geometric patterns, rotating like starlit constellations. The wall shivered, and a portion of it drew back with a sigh, revealing a second room. Smaller, more private. Storms last for days, she said. You will not survive if you remain here alone. But my laws will not allow me to simply offer you shelter. He stared at her, not understanding. She stepped aside and gestured for him to enter. You must prove yourself worthy of the warmth. Inside. The second chamber was different, tighter. The walls shimmered with finer crystal threads, veins glowing faintly with residual heat. The fire here was smaller, more concentrated. It pulsed with a slower beat, like a living thing resting between breaths. At its center, another ring of crystals, except these were fractured, humming with unstable resonance. Gary hesitated, then looked back at her. How do I prove myself? She walked forward, unslinging her satchel and kneeling beside the fractured fire. She spoke of something ancient, the ritual of the flame bond. A test not of strength or combat, but of resonance. Carolyn flames, she explained, were living constructs tied to emotion and clarity of intent. To sit by a fire and not disrupt its rhythm was to be trusted. But the fractured flame? It mirrored those who approached it. If his mind wavered, if he harbored hidden violence or deception, it would lash out. You must sit, she said, and calm your storm, or it will become part of the fire. Gary stepped forward, heart pounding. Was this real? Was this ritual, or test, or both? He knelt, closed his eyes, and the flame ... responded. A sudden lurch of pressure hit his chest. The temperature spiked, then dropped. Images bloomed in his mind, fragments of memory. The crash, the last words of his crew, the static scream of his dying comes. His fists clenched, and the flame jumped. Lily's voice rang out sharply behind him. "Breathe. Find your rhythm," he tried. Thought of his brother's voice, his mother's garden, the hum of the dropship when everything still worked. He exhaled. Slow and even, the flame settled. When he opened his eyes, the fire no longer hissed. It pulsed, calmly, in sync with his breathing. Lily knelt beside him again, her golden eyes softer now. Less guarded. "You don't belong to the guild," she said quietly. "You don't carry their stench." Gary shook his head. She reached out and pressed her palm to the crystal beside the fire. The chamber shifted. Walls slid inward, narrowing, and heat bloomed from every seam. Lily lowered herself beside him, not touching, but close enough that he could feel her presence, an anchor in the storm that still howled beyond the cave's mouth. "You may stay," she said, "but if your fire falters, we both burn." Gary said nothing, but in the glow of the fractured flame, he felt something anchored deep inside something that wasn't just survival anymore. The storm outside never truly stopped. It scraped and howled against the cave like a living thing, clawing at the edges of the stone with talons of frost. Gary barely slept. His body ached from crash trauma, and his muscles screamed every time. He shifted position, but the real reason he stayed awake was Lily. Not fear. He didn't think she would hurt him. It was something else. A kind of gravity she carried, quiet and unshakable, like the way planets pull on moons without ever saying a word. When he did drift off, it wasn't for long. Dreams came in broken static visions of burning skies and crushed metal, of a whispering flame that pulsed with voices he couldn't understand. And always her silhouette in the distance, golden eyes watching from behind a wall of crystal light. By the time he blinked, fully awake, violet fire still danced low in the chamber, casting subtle ripples along Lily's resting form. She'd moved. In the night. Now she was closer, only an arm's length away. Her breath was soft and measured, but her spear still lay within reach. Gary didn't move. Then she stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, golden irises catching the low glow. She didn't speak. Just watched him for a long moment, searching, measuring, reading him the way she read fire. Finally, she stood and walked to the outer chamber. Gary followed, bones stiff, pain stitched into every movement. The storm had lessened. Not calm, not safe, but the pressure had shifted. Outside, a dull violet haze swept over the snowfields, filtering through wind-thinned clouds. It was a window. Lily approached the cave's entrance, crouched low, and pressed her hand to the ground. The crystals in the stone responded, pulses of faint energy flickering through unseen lines like nerves in a sleeping creature. "The beacon?" she asked. Gary nodded, pulling it from beneath his cloak. The casing was warped. One side scorched from atmospheric entry, the other cracked from impact. It was a miracle it still held form. He twisted the lock and pulled the inner cell loose. A pale blue glow flickered from the node, then died. Dead. Burned through. No charge. No signal. No hope. Lily tilted her head. "You carry a dead voice." "And expect it to speak." Gary almost laughed. But something about her tone, half metaphor, half scolding, stung. She gestured for him to follow. They moved deeper into the cave. The passage narrowed, walls closer now, the air heavier with heat. As they walked, crystal veins thickened beneath their feet and above their heads, glowing softly with internal pulses. Faint glyphs lined the walls, murals carved by careful hands. Gary paused at one. It showed a figure holding a fractured sphere surrounded by swirling lines of energy and flame. Beneath it, a fleet of ships, their shapes sleek, ancient, beautiful, and unmistakably not human. "You were starfarers," Gary whispered. "Before the guild?" Lily touched the mural. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Before the embargo. Before they sealed us in ice and buried our names." At the passage's end, they emerged into a wide chamber unlike any he'd seen. It wasn't natural. It was a forge. A stone basin dominated the center, ringed with fractured pillars of fused alloy and crystal. The air shimmered with latent heat, and the floor hummed with power deep and old. Lily stepped forward, removed a rod from a hidden niche, and slotted it into a socket along the basin's rim. Energy rippled outward. The forge awoke. The crystals glowed with rich violet light, spiraling upward along the pillars. The hum grew louder. Something ancient stirred. "Place your beacon," she said. Gary hesitated. Then he laid the broken cell into the center of the basin. Lily knelt. Her hands hovered over the crystal edge, palms down. Her eyes fluttered shut, and her lips began to move in a language that vibrated against his teeth. The resonance grew stronger, pulsing through the chamber in slow, deep waves. And then the forge responded. The broken beacon cell shimmered. Micro cracks pulsed with energy. Bent plates straightened. Scorch marks faded. The cell began to mend, but not with solder and tools. The crystal was fusing it with energy and memory, like a healing wound closing around a scar. Gary stared. "You're not just a guardian, are you?" Lily didn't answer. Not at first. When the process was done, she opened her eyes. Sweat glistened on her skin, her breath uneven. She held out the cell. It pulsed a soft blue, alive again. "I was trained to tend flame and code," she said, "before the matriarchy exiled me." Gary took the beacon, his fingers brushing. Her skin was hot, too hot. Not fevered, charged. "You used yourself," he said. You're connected to it." She nodded, eyes distant. "Every Carolyn is born to one crystal line. Mine runs through this ridge." He stared at her. "Then you're the power source." "No," she said gently. "The flame is. I just carry the spark." They returned to the upper chamber, Gary clutching the newly repaired cell, the signal node pulsing faintly with promise. But just as he reached for his toolkit, a sharp keening sound echoed from above. He froze. Lily's head snapped up, golden eyes narrowing. Outside the cave, through the narrow slit of the entrance, 3 sleek shapes cut across the clouds. Drones. Guild issued. Black hulls, violet undersides, oscillating sensors scanning for unauthorized energy use, searching for signals. Searching for them. The beacon cell in his hand flared faintly, too bright. Lily cursed in her native tongue. Then she moved faster than he'd seen her move yet. She pulled a folded cloth from her satchel and unwrapped it across the cave floor. Dozens of mirror shards caught the firelight, bouncing it wildly across every surface. Refraction. Disguise. She spun the mirrors in precise angles, fracturing the room's heat signature into chaotic loops. "False echoes. Decoys. Hide it," she said sharply, pointing to the cell. Gary slid it under his cloak. The drone's hum grew louder. A dark shape swept over the cave mouth, scanning beam trailing through the storm. It passed once, paused, then again. Closer. Gary didn't breathe. Lily didn't move. The drone hesitated. Then it turned and vanished over the ridge. The silence afterward was deafening. Gary exhaled, slumping against the wall. His hands were shaking. Lily crouched beside the forge's entrance, watching the horizon. "Next time," she said, voice low and calm, "they won't fly past. They'll land." Gary looked at her, the weight of the moment settling in his chest. She'd just risked everything, her law, her exile, her life to shield him. And in that moment, he realized the truth. He wasn't the only one trying to survive. She was risking everything just for the right to feel warmth beside another soul. And the Fire was no longer just his lifeline. It was theirs. The drone's hum hadn't left Gary's ears, even after it vanished beyond the ridge. It was a phantom, now an echo behind his heartbeat, as if the sound had imprinted itself into his bones. Beside him, Lily slowly rose from her crouch. The shards she'd used to scatter their heat signature were already packed away, her hands moving with silent precision, as if she'd done it 100 times before. Gary sat frozen near the fire, clutching the still warm beacon cell against his chest. Like a talisman. He knew now that one wrong pulse, one stray flicker of light, could end both their lives. Lily turned to him. "We have maybe an hour. The drones will return with ground patrols if they detect the same anomaly twice." He nodded. "Then we need to boost the signal. Get a burst out before they lock down the area." She stared at him a moment longer, then motioned him to follow. "There's a place," she said, "below." The path she led him down was steep and narrow, descending through a chasm carved into the heart of the mountain. The walls glowed faintly, etched with veins of the same living crystal that powered her fire. They pulsed as they passed, reacting to her presence like a living nervous system. When she reached out to touch them, the pulse grew stronger, forming brief ripples of light that illuminated the carvings hidden beneath the dust of decades. "These were once used to heat Starforge cores," she said, her voice low. "Back when we weren't ghosts." The corridor widened suddenly into a vault of pure crystalline architecture, arched ceilings of fused mineral, suspended catwalks, and a central chamber dominated by a basin of dormant energy. It looked like a temple, silent, sacred. Except this temple was made of circuits and memory, forged by hands that remembered stars. "This was our uplink relay," Lily said, "before the guild banned off-world comms and buried the network." In edicts, Gary's eyes swept the chamber. "It's still functional?" "Enough to matter." She moved to the central dais, unslung her spear, and inserted the haft into a narrow socket in the floor. A faint vibration moved through the metal under Gary's boots. Crystals above them flickered. The pillars hummed with buried power. "Help me reroute the beacon's core into the forge. We'll push a single burst, one scream into space." Gary didn't hesitate. They stripped the beacon casing, rewired the emitter nodes with crystal-wrapped copper. He watched her fingers move over the conduit locks like a language she hadn't spoken in years. With every adjustment, her shoulders grew more tense, more fragile, until he realized she was shaking. "Lily," he said softly. She didn't stop moving. "If we fail, I am already unsanctioned. If we succeed, they will know I aided you. You saved my life, and I condemned my own." She knelt before the crystal node. A final sequence of glyphs bloomed beneath her palms. Gary saw it then, how the energy crawled up her arms, her veins lighting like molten wires, her eyes dimming as if a part of her was slipping away to feed the relay. "You're overcharging," he said, grabbing her shoulder. "That cell can't take this." "It doesn't need to," she whispered. "It only needs to scream loud enough." The beacon lit. A single pulse erupted from the forge chamber. Violet light surged up through the ceiling, through conduits, through stone. The walls shook. Dust rained down. Outside, a beam of raw signal burst into the sky, burning through the storm like a sword of light, and then the light stuttered. The beacon's core cracked. Smoke curled from its casing. It had worked, but not enough. Gary cursed, scrambling to pull the cell free, but Lily stopped him. Her hand gripped his wrist with surprising strength. "There's another way." She turned to the far end of the chamber toward a sealed door built into the rock. Ancient glyphs lined the frame, half buried in soot and crystal sediment. The kind of door no one had opened in generations. "That leads to the relay's spine," she said. "The control nexus. It runs deeper, beneath the crust." Gary frowned. You said it was sealed. She nodded. By the matriarchy. No exile is allowed there. He stared at the door, then at her. What happens if you go down there? I cease to be Carolyn, she said quietly. I become ... nothing. The silence between them stretched like a wire pulled tight. You saved me, he said. Let me return the favor. She didn't smile, but something flickered in her golden eyes, a tremor, a ripple of trust. Together they approached the door. Gary braced the cracked beacon cell against the ancient lock. Lily laid her palm over it and whispered a word in her native tongue. The door responded with a groan like a dying god. Glyphs sparked, metal cracked, and slowly the seal broke. Warm air spilled out thick with dust, ozone, and history. They descended into the forbidden dark. The crystal conduit walls narrowed as they went, glowing faintly in reaction to her pulse. Gary stayed close, one hand always brushing the side of the wall in case the path vanished behind them. You're not afraid? He asked. She shook her head once. I was, but not anymore. The tunnel opened into a vast circular shaft. Below, a chamber glowed alive with veins of violet light. Machinery blinked awake after centuries of silence. This was the heart of Carolyn memory. Now, they had entered it together. Gary turned to her, not as a survivor, not as a human, but as something else, someone who would walk every forbiddance path just to keep her warmed. She met his eyes. The glow of the forge reflected in her irises, and in that moment, beneath a world of exile, the fire they shared stopped being a question of survival. It became a promise. The air in the Nexus chamber was thicker than oxygen had any right to be, heavy with heat, memory, and the trembling hum of systems that had not breathed in centuries. Gary stepped onto the platform beside Lily, and the moment his boots touched the crystal-inlaid floor, something ancient stirred beneath them. A low thrumming pulsed through the ground, not mechanical but alive like a heartbeat buried in the stone. All around them, 6 massive crystal pylons stretched from the molten floor to the cavernous ceiling, their surfaces etched with filigree, script that shimmered to life one glyph at a time. Overhead, a tangled web of conduits and suspended walkways looped like neural networks frozen mid-thought. This place had not simply been abandoned. It had been locked away, sealed by law and fear, left to slumber so deeply that even time had forgotten how to wake it. But Lily remembered. She walked ahead without hesitation, her spear strapped to her back, her boots echoing against the metalwork like a war drum in a cathedral. Gary followed, trying to keep his breath steady as rivulets of sweat trickled down his spine. The heat was building, waves of it radiating from the molten pools beneath. The platform. This deep under Narth's crust, they weren't just standing in a communications hub. They were in the arterial root of an ancient energy grid powered by geothermal veins wrapped in living crystal. At the center of the dais, Lily stopped before a black console embedded with a fist-sized control crystal. It looked like obsidian, fused with sapphire, cracked down its core by stress or battle or time. She placed both palms on either side of it and closed her eyes. The chamber responded. One by one, the pylons flickered. The symbols etched across their surfaces began to glow with a pulsing sequence, erratic at first, then aligning into harmonic rhythm. Gary felt the shift like a weight inside his chest. It pressed behind his eyes, twisted in his ribs. The entire chamber was a living organism now, and Lily was its pulse. This system wasn't just for relays, she said, her voice steady despite the tremble in her limbs. It controlled the moon's crustal balance. The guild didn't just shut down our communication. They shut down our planet. Gary moved beside her, reading the data that flickered across the console. Multiple pressure nodes were rising. Crystal channels that had once diffused thermal spikes were collapsing. The beacon pulse they sent had reactivated more than an uplink. They'd triggered a flare quake. He swore under his breath. How long? Minutes, maybe less, and we're standing on the switch. She nodded. There's a stabilization protocol buried in the system. If we realign the harmonic bands of all 6 pillars, we might bleed off the surge into the mantle, stop the quake from rupturing the southern ridge. Might? She glanced at him. I've never done this. Gary almost laughed. But instead, he knelt, pulling his toolkit open on the platform. Tell me what to do. They worked in a furious rhythm, Gary crawling between interface nodes and junction panels, rerouting power through scorched conduits while Lily chanted harmonic triggers in the Carolan tongue, each word vibrating through the crystal like ripples. In a still lake, sweat soaked through her tunic. Her golden eyes dimmed and flared as the crystal responded to her, matching her heartbeat one moment and resisting the next. The floor shook. Deep groan echoed from the walls as molten pressure roared through the grid below. A fine crack zipped through the dais under Gary's knees. He grabbed a stabilizer rod, wedged it beneath the primary pylon, and shouted above the roar. Last one, it's out of sync. Lily stumbled toward it, the glyphs around her bleeding. Light in uneven pulses. Her legs gave way once then again, but she caught herself on the base of the pylon, braced her spear into a grounding socket, and slammed both palms into the control ring. The entire chamber flared. Burst of blinding violet light shot through the pillars, illuminating every wall, every conduit, every hidden glyph. The quake stuttered pause, then slowly began to fade. Gary stared as the harmonic waves fell into perfect rhythm, the once chaotic pulses now beating like a calm heart. He turned to Lily just as her legs buckled. He caught her before she hit the molten-lit floor, cradling her against his chest. Her skin radiated searing heat, her breath ragged. The veins in her arms still pulsed with residual energy from the stabilization surge. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharpening on his face. It worked, she whispered. Gary nodded, his voice tight. Yeah, you stopped it. Her lips curved into the faintest smile before her body sagged. In his arms. He held her there, wrapped in the flickering afterglow of an ancient machine that had almost killed them both. And as her breathing slowed, he realized something deeper than awe or relief or even admiration had taken root inside him. He was no longer just trying to survive. He was fighting for her. He lowered her gently to the dais, checked her vitals still. Strong, still burning. She needed rest. But they weren't safe yet. The console sparked beside him. A secondary alert blinked across the glyph display. Gary leaned in, squinting at the scrolling data. Seismic stabilization confirmed. Auxiliary. Systems rerouting power. Emergency uplink ... reactivating ... His breath caught. The relay was still alive ... and now, powered by the flare quake's dissipated energy, it was climbing to full broadcast range. He could send another signal, a stronger one, but something else caught. His eye another alert, not from the relay. From deep beneath the chamber floor. Something was waking. Subterranean construct detected. Status. Dormant rising. He turned back to Lily, but she was already sitting up. One hand braced against the floor. Golden eyes wide with warning. They buried something here, she said. Not just tech. Gary felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. They sealed it for a reason. And now they had cracked it open. The relay chamber was no longer quiet. It breathed, not with air, but with pressure, with soundless vibrations that pulsed through the crystal struts and echoed in Gary's bones like a drumbeat from something massive, ancient and angry waking. Up below, he crouched beside Lily as she slowly pushed herself upright, her golden eyes narrowed, her skin still glowing faintly from the energy she had absorbed. A low hum spread across the floor, a resonance not born of the crystal relay, but beneath it. Gary stared at the readout flashing across the console. The seismic wave pattern had stabilized, but something far worse was stirring now. Not a quake, not even geothermal recoil, resonance breach. Deep substructure reactivating. Containment status compromised. What's under us? He asked, his voice tight with dread. Lily didn't answer right away. She stood, legs unsteady but firm, and moved toward the control dais. The glyphs beneath her feet shimmered as she passed, like the floor itself was reacting to her presence. There are myths, she said, voice low, hollow. Stories carved into walls most are forbidden to read. About a place beneath the mantle where the first Carolyn engineers stored the truth. Gary moved to her side, glancing at the pulsing data. What kind of truth? She looked at him, and for the first time since the crash, he saw something raw in her eyes. Why the guild really silenced us? Another tremor vibrated through. The floor gentler than the flare quake, but deeper, rhythmic. Pattern. Not natural. Alive. Gary gritted his teeth and pulled the beacon interface from his satchel. If the relay's still active, I can boost the burst. We send another ping, this time wideband. Somebody will hear us. Lily nodded, but her expression didn't relax. And if the guild hears it too, then they'll come, he said. Which means we need to be gone. She turned toward a side passage behind the main relay node, sealed with ancient alloy doors coated in mineral accretion and age. She raised her hand palm open and spoke a word in the old tongue. The door responded. Not by opening, but by lighting. Up, intricate sigils glowed in circles across its surface. The light spread like frost catching flame, revealing what had been hidden beneath the rust and dust of centuries, a warning glyph. Not mechanical, ceremonial, a seal. I wasn't mad to see this. Lily whispered. Gary stepped closer. Then why does it respond to you? She didn't answer. Another pulse rose from below, stronger this time. The chamber shuddered. Cracks spider-webbed across the nearest pillar. A sound like distant thunder echoed up the conduit shafts. Lily turned. To him, face set. We need to go down. Gary didn't argue. The door groaned open, dust spilling and curling plumes from the hinges as the ancient seal cracked and gave way. Beyond lay a staircase spiraling into darkness, lined with narrow conduits that pulsed like veins. The air was warm, laced with ozone, and smelled of ancient metals and crystal vapor. As they descended, the tunnel narrowed. They moved in silence. The only sounds their breath and the faint whisper of current pulsing through the crystal conduits embedded in the walls. Then the steps ended, and the world opened. They emerged into a spherical chamber, so vast it made Gary's lungs seize. The ceiling was lost in shadow. Pillars of crystal wider than dropships descended from above into a platform suspended over a lake of molten crystal. In the center of that lake, encased in a web of glowing conduits and humming energy locks, was a structure, or a being. It was impossible to define at first, both mechanical and organic. A fusion of starship hull plating, living crystal, and something pulsing with heat and intention. Its shape shifted slowly, subtly, as if dreaming. Or waiting. Gary's breath caught. What is that? Lily's voice trembled. It's a Coramind. She stepped closer, eyes wide with awe and dread. My ancestors built them. Sentient reactors. Living network nodes that could manage planetary systems. Each colony had one, but they required a bonded interface. Someone who could resonate with them. Gary felt the realization drop into him like a stone into ice water. The guild didn't just bury your people. They buried this. They were afraid, she whispered. Afraid of what we could become if we kept our flame alive. The Coramind stirred. A pulse of energy surged up the support pillars. The platform vibrated beneath their feet. Above them, ancient turbines flared awake, pushing airflow through sealed chambers, and then a voice deep and fractured spoke through the crystal walls. Not in sound, in vibration. In feeling, unbonded. Incomplete. Access. Denied. Kalan, the pillars flashed red dot, the temperature rose sharply. Lily stumbled back, clutching her chest. Her crystal veins flared violet. The Coramind had recognized her, but not accepted her. Gary grabbed her before she fell. Can we shut it down? No, not anymore. Her eyes were wide with pain. It woke up hungry. Another pulse surged. From the platform, this time upward, back into the relay, chamber dot back toward the surface. Gary's comm cracked, not from interference, but from outside. Unknown burst signature detected. Prepare orbit lock. Guild patrol inbound ETA 5 minutes. He looked at Lily. She was shaking. Whether from fear or resonance overload, he didn't know. We need to run. No, she said, voice steadier now. We need to finish this. Her hand tightened around her spear. The Coramind can amplify. Your beacon if it bonds, Gary's heart pounded. But it said unbonded. It rejected me, she said, lifting her chin. But maybe not us. He stared at her. You think we can do this together? She nodded, slowly. If we align, if we synchronize. Even for a moment, it might accept. He reached for her hand, it was burning hot, but he didn't let go. They stepped toward the dais together, toward the dream machine sealed in a molten lake. Above them, the guild descended. Below them, the Coramind opened its eyes. Gary's boots clanged against the heat-forged metal as he stepped with Lily onto the final platform, a thin bridge of crystal and alloy suspended above a lake of molten light. The Coramind pulsed ahead, massive and alive, shaped like no machine he'd ever seen. Its surface twisted and reformed constantly, never settling into one solid form. Wings, lattice hull, heart, every shape flickered through its body like thoughts passing across a dreaming mind. Lily's hand tightened in his. She was burning again, her violet veins glowing like star-choked nebulae beneath her skin. Her breath came sharp and slow. The more they moved toward the Coramind, the more it responded, light building in flickering bursts, energy coiling like a storm held on a leash. The bridge trembled beneath them. Gary glanced up, through the chasm above, past the cracked roof of the Nexus chamber. The dull red burn of thrusters painted the sky. Guild patrols, dropships, at least 3 of them, descending fast. A voice echoed in his helmet, crackling, sharp, unidentified. Beacon signature logged. Surface presence confirmed. Guild enforcement en route. Prepare for containment. He muted the channel. They weren't going to listen. They weren't going to ask questions. The moment those ships landed, they'd erase everything. The relay, the crystal tech, the Coramind. Lily. Gary turned to her. We've got one chance, she nodded. Her golden eyes shimmered with heat and fear and defiance. You follow my lead. I'll follow the flame. They stepped together to the center of the dais. The Coramind loomed above, silent now, watching. Lily pulled her spear free and drove it into the slot carved into the platform. The impact sent a ripple through the bridge. Glyphs flared beneath their feet, arcing around them in a spiral of ancient code. She raised both arms and began to speak, not just words but frequencies. Gary could hear them, feel them, each syllable struck a chord deep inside him, echoing in his chest like the hum of old engines, like the gravity fields of ships he'd once flown. Place your hands on the interface crystal, she said. He did. Heat surged up his arms through his spine. Visions blurred behind his eyes of fire, of stars, of a sea of light that stretched between galaxies. He saw Lily as a girl, standing before a line of elders. He saw her cast out, alone. He saw himself dragging himself from a broken wreck, frostbite in his lungs, blood in his mouth, and her eyes in the dark, and he saw them together aligned, not by fate, but by choice. The glyphs blazed. The Korra mind screamed, but it wasn't pain. It was awakening. A shockwave of crystal light burst from the platform, racing up the pillars, tearing through the relay above. The molten lake beneath them surged but did not boil over. Instead, it collapsed, inward energy folding into itself, compressed by forces older than logic. Gary screamed through clenched teeth as the core mind's voice poured into his mind, thoughts too big, too alien, fracturing and reforming in an instant. Bond established. Signal path found. Initiating last light protocol. Colon above them. The dropships blinked out one by one as the Korra mind sent a burst through the atmosphere, disrupting their guidance systems. Gary caught a glimpse of the patrols through the fissured ceiling, veering, tumbling, forced to retreat or risk collision with the ridge. Then the signal surged outward. Not just a distress ping, not just a location burst, but a full transmission. Carried on a resonance frequency tied to Lily's crystal biology, amplified by Gary's human signal structure. It was a signature that had not existed before now. Human and Carolyn. Bound. The flame bond reborn. The platform stabilized. The glyphs dimmed. The tremors slowed. The Korra mind, for the first time, settled into a single form, a towering spire of crystal-laced alloy, its heart pulsing with calm. Deep light. Gary collapsed to his knees, gasping. Lily dropped beside him, her forehead pressed to the warm metal. Her skin shimmered like cooled magma, her breathing shallow but steady. They had done it. Above, the relay dish flared one final time. A response ping lit the console. Inbound vessel detected. Non-guild IFF ETA. 37 minutes. Gary blinked, tears from his eyes. They were coming. Not the guild. Someone else. A signal had gone out, witnessed, recorded, and now answered. Lily sat up, hair clinging to her neck with sweat, and looked at him. Heard them, she said, voice hoarse. You heard the flame. He nodded. And they heard us. She leaned into him, her forehead against his. This changes everything. Gary smiled, teeth chattering. Good. They sat together on the dais while the Korra mind entered its dormant cycle, its light soft now, ambient and patient. The walls no longer shook. The glyphs slowed to a heartbeat rhythm. Above, the wind finally died. The sky cleared. And rescue was coming. When the ship broke the clouds, it wasn't gilt-gray. It was sleek and gold-veined, marked by insignia neither of them had seen in a lifetime. A ship older than the blockade, older than exile, hovering like a relic of the stars, answering. A flame long thought extinguished. Gary and Lily emerged from the relay to meet it. The snow crunched beneath their feet. The storm had passed. The ridge glowed violet in the rising dawn. She looked up at him, her spear on her back, her scars shining like glass. You came here to survive, she said. He took her hand, held it against his chest. I stayed because of you? And as they boarded the rescue vessel side by side, not exile and outsider, but bonded, Lily turned her face toward the sun for the first time in years. The fire wasn't just warmth anymore. It was a future. And it was theirs.